Welcome to Wall Street versus Main Street, a different take on the investment show with our host, Dax White. Dax White is the managing partner of the White Law Group, a national securities fraud, securities arbitration, and investor protection law firm with offices in Chicago, Illinois, and Vero Beach, Florida. The White Law Group has represented hundreds of investors in FINRA arbitration claims against their brokerage firms, and throughout this show, Mr. White will shine a light on some of the tricks of the brokerage industry, while also providing valuable information for investors on how to successfully navigate the investor-financial advisor relationship.
Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Wall Street versus Main Street. I'm your host, Dax White. As our lead-in indicated, this is sort of a different take on an investment show. I am not a licensed investment professional. Rather, I am a securities attorney who represents investors exclusively in claims against brokerage firms. And the objective of this show is to go through some of the things that I've picked up through the course of my career that I think the investment public would like to know, or I wish they knew, or however you would like to phrase it. Because the reality of the brokerage industry is that it is designed as it's a business and they are trying to make money, and that those interests don't always align with their clients. And there's a lot of things that the brokerage industry does that is potentially sneaky. And, again, there's a lot of information that I wish the investment public had, sort of even the playing field a bit, get you asking better questions, going into that relationship a little bit more eyes wide open, and making it so that you would never need a lawyer like me. And so that's the objective of the show. Today, we're going to be discussing my sort of top 8 things the brokerage industry wishes you didn't know or doesn't want you to know. The first one has to do with the financial advisor's obligation to you. I would think that the vast majority of investors out there, and certainly the people that we've represented, believed this. But I would think that most investors out there think that their financial advisor has a fiduciary duty to you. And financial advisors, or certainly their lawyers, would argue that that's not true. They would argue that they do not have a fiduciary duty to you. And where that becomes important has to do with the recommendations they make, and obviously the obligations to you and sort of your understanding, because the obligation they think they have has only to do with suitability. Their obligation, they believe, is to look at your income, your net worth, your investment objectives, your investment experience, your time horizon, your age, and evaluate all those factors and make a recommendation that's appropriate, make sure it's suitable. And the inherent problem with that standard is that in the confines of that obligation, you could have, let's say you have an investor who's looking for growth and they want a mutual fund in equities and they like the technology sector. So they're looking for a technology mutual fund. And the financial advisor says, I looked into it and I found 3 that do basically what you're asking for. I've run your suitability analysis, and I think they're all appropriate for you. But this one's my favorite. This is the one I think you should go for. And so the problem there is that if the 3 investments are basically the same, they're all in theory suitable for you, but they're not necessarily in all 3 in your best interest, because let's say one of them pays the broker a 4% upfront fee, and the other one pays 1%. Or maybe one of them was an ETF that did the same thing and paid 0.1%. And so the problem there is if your financial advisor has a fiduciary duty to you, their obligation is to do what is in your best interest, not theirs. And so they would be obligated, if those 3 investments were basically the same, to recommend the one that paid the lowest percentage commission. But if the obligation is simply suitability, then under that obligation, they can pick the one. They're all suitable, so they can just pick the one that pays them the most money. And so that is one of the common, I think, misconceptions of the brokerage industry, and certainly something I don't think a lot of investors know, and something the brokerage industry doesn't want you to know. Because if you knew that, you'd probably be asking a bunch of questions about commissions and how is this commission relative to this investment, and why is it that much and not this much, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first thing that I think the brokerage industry doesn't want you to know. The second one, and I know I've mentioned this in previous episodes because I just chuckle's not the right word because it's really unfortunate. But when I hear clients say this, it It does make me laugh because it's so unfortunate. But another thing the brokerage industry doesn't want you to know is that all these guys are vice presidents. I hear it all the time where a potential client says, I trusted the guy. He was a vice president. I assumed then that he was high up in the food chain, really good at what he does, et cetera, et cetera. And therein lies the problem. And that is exactly why they're almost all vice presidents. They're not all vice presidents, but it sure seems like everyone that we get a call on, that's their title. And the brokerage industry does that to prop these guys up and make them seem further along in their career or more important than they maybe are. And the other thing that's problematic about it is that designation is often commission-based. It's often given to financial advisors based on how much revenue they generate, as opposed to seniority or promotions or anything like that. It's oftentimes, if you hit this benchmark of production, you get the title vice president. So if you're hearing that, if you're relying on that, thinking, oh my gosh, my guy's great, that's not, it's really indicative of nothing. And again, it's sort of an illusion that the industry uses to, again, prop these guys up and make them seem like they're the financial gurus you should be listening to. But it's nothing more than a nominal title they give out to create that illusion. So that's number 2 on the things I think the brokerage industry doesn't want you to know. Number 3 is that there is no investment-related degree required to be a financial advisor. I think maybe the assumption that most people would make is these are guys or gals, of course, that went to school and studied economics or business or whatever, and maybe they spent a couple years at some sort of preparatory school learning about economic theory and how to invest, et cetera, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Some of them certainly did those things, and maybe that's the financial advisor you should be looking for, but the vast majority of them have no such background, and nor is there any requirement. The reality is most of the job description and most of what brokerage industries are looking for is a background in sales. At the end of the day, that's what they're being hired to do, is sell products and make money for the companies. And they sort of make this assumption they can train you on the rest. And the less investment experience you have, maybe the more you'll just follow their company line in terms of what you recommend. And I've seen it a number of times with people who were in the industry but left because they just couldn't stand it anymore. And what you hear a lot of is, I started out and I'm selling what they tell me to sell, and it took me a couple of years to realize those weren't in the interest of my clients. And I couldn't do it anymore, so I left. And that's a fundamental disconnect, I think, between perception and reality in terms of investors, their understanding of the brokerage industry. But at the end of the day, it's a sales job. It's a high-end sales job, but it's a sales job nonetheless, and that's what they're looking for, and they're not necessarily hiring guys who have this phenomenal background. And it sort of goes back to number 2 where they give them the title, but I mean, they're trying to create this perception for clients, of course. They want you to think that's what these people are, but you got to peel the onion further. And again, there certainly are people out there that fall into that category, and they're unquestionably great financial advisors in the industry, but they're not all like that. And so, it's a false assumption if you're thinking, oh, I'm meeting with a financial advisor. He must have this great background. He went to Wharton. He did this and he did that. And it's, I actually, in college worked at a brokerage firm for a bunch of financial advisors as just like a clerk job. And several of the most successful guys in that office didn't even go to college. I don't know that a lot of brokerage firms hire non-college educated people, but again, it's not like it's a FINRA requirement to get registered in the business to sell securities that you have this background. The fourth thing that I think the brokerage industry wishes you didn't know or doesn't want you to know is that financial advisors are not required to carry insurance. Your basic errors and admissions, E&O coverage. I would think that most people would assume, if my broker, screws up, he's probably got some E&O. And for many financial advisors, that's true. A lot of them, just because I think that's smart business practice, do have E&O insurance, but it's not a requirement, and it's not across the board. And unfortunately, in the saddest instances, the most extreme instances where you have a really, horrible financial advisor who's taking advantage of people in a very egregious way, those are usually the ones who didn't get E&O. Those are the guys who you sue them and they just leave the industry and they've spent the money and good luck finding them, and there's no one left holding the bag. So, don't assume that your financial advisor has E&O insurance. Obviously, you're never entering into this relationship hoping that you're going to be suing them and that they'll have insurance. You're hoping, of course, that never happens, because that would require you to lose money first. But I think there is this assumption amongst a lot of investors that, worst case scenario, I can go after them and there'll be some insurance there. And the reality is that's not true. The fifth thing I think the brokerage industry doesn't want you to know, and this has to do with the smaller players, not the Morgan Stanleys of the world. But the fifth thing is that it is actually incredibly easy to open a brokerage firm, and you don't need a lot of money to do it. The requirements to open a brokerage firm, in terms of your capitalization, the amount of money that you have on hand, can be as low as $5,000. There are brokerage firms out there that have a $5,000 net capital requirement, so they only have to have $5,000 on hand to stay open. And it goes up from there, but there are a lot of firms that fall into that category, and it sort of speaks to the last one in terms of your expectations and your risk. I think, again, the assumption is you see this financial advisor who's got registrations, and he's a registered financial advisor in the industry, and he works for this company, and there's all this backing behind him, and that's of course the perception they're going to want to try to create so that you're willing to do business with that company. But it's not always the case, and unfortunately for us, or as lawyers who do this kind of work, that's often one of the more difficult things in evaluating cases, because there's a ton of brokerage firms out there that are undercapitalized. So you get into a situation where they did wrong, and you try to bring a claim and they just fold up shop, or they call and say, we're a $5,000 brokerage firm. If you, sue us and win and get an award for more than that, we're just going to fold up shop. And I find that deplorable and unfortunate, and I wish regulators would step in, but that is the reality, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. Again, I think the perception is that if something happens, I've got this big company behind me, and I can reach out to them, sue them, whatever is required to get them to step up and make right the wrongs of their employee. But in a lot of cases that, again, it's the most extreme cases. It's the ones where the financial advisor stole the money, or it was a Ponzi scheme, and there's just nobody left. There's nothing there. So, that's something I don't think a lot of people realize, and I wish they did, because they might ask more questions and ask about, how many financial advisors work at this company? How big are you guys? How many offices do you have? Do you carry, that kind of thing. The sixth thing that I think the brokerage industry doesn't want people to know, or wishes they didn't know, is that there are a number of financial advisors out there in the industry right now, as we speak, that have been sued by their clients in excess of 40 times. I would think that most people would assume that if you get sued enough times, the regulators step in and kick them out of the business, or the brokerage firms stop hiring them because they've been sued so many times. But the reality is, if you're still profitable as a financial advisor, if your book of business is big enough, and if the cost benefit analysis is such that they, every couple of years they have to pay out on a few customer complaints, but overall you're still profitable to them, they will keep you. They will hire you. They will keep you there. Again, I see it all the time where we get involved in litigation with a financial advisor, and you see their record, and they've been sued. I think the most I saw was like 66 times, and he was still in the business, still working. Regulators sometimes will step in, but there's not like a trigger number where if a guy gets sued 20 times, they're going to investigate. It's more happenstance. It's, who complained, is there a reason to step in and investigate here? And so they'll catch some of the bad guys, but not all of them. And I think that would shock a lot of people, and certainly the brokerage industry wouldn't want you thinking, oh, my vice president, who's got this great background that he doesn't really have, has been sued 45 times. Because if you knew that information, I'm sure you wouldn't entrust your life savings to that person. And so they're going to try to keep that information from you. They're going to try to get it so that you assume that, all these guys are above board. And then again, I hate to pick on the industry. I know that I deal with the worst of the worst, and I know that there's a ton of great financial advisors out there, and I've met many of them, or some of them. But there are bad apples, and the industry is set up to make money, and so they're trying to keep some of the warts from sight. And that certainly would be one of the warts. Again, having a financial advisor with that kind of background. The seventh thing that I know the brokerage industry doesn't want you to know is that it is incredibly difficult to consistently beat the market. And this isn't me talking. This is a basic economic principle that I learned in college, and that I think most people learn, is that it's tough. These money managers that say that they outperform the market, and do all these great things for you. That is it unquestionably happens. You can do it in year 1, and maybe you can do it again in year 2, and maybe you can even do it again in year 3, but it is very difficult to consistently do that, to consistently outperform the market and not have a year where the market's up 10% and you're only up 4. And the reason that's important, because it's not indisputable, but there are a lot of economists that would take that position. But the reason it's important is because, again, the brokerage industry is set up to generate commissions. And so in order to outperform the market, you would need to outperform it by more than what you're paying your financial advisor. Otherwise, you would be better off just tracking the market, not paying any commissions. And a lot of people would tell you that maybe that's the best way to go. Buy a low-cost ETF, track the market, and, you won't be ahead of the market, but you won't be behind the market, because, where you get killed is that year where the market's up 10, but you're only up 6, and you paid your financial advisor 2. And if you do that every year, even if you're tracking the market on a regular basis, but you're paying 2% commission, then you're not really tracking the market. You're really 2% behind the 8 ball. So not only do they have to beat the market, but they got to beat it by an appreciable amount that accounts for their commissions. And that cuts into sort of the problem of having somebody managing your money, is the various ways where they cut into that performance, because it's not just your financial advisor who gets paid for making recommendations, but you've got money managers who get paid for managing the money and making the investment selections. And you've got wholesalers that get paid for getting financial advisors to recommend the money managers. And you've got all these people coming into the pocket of your money, chipping away at it. And so the only way you really make out is if you happen to be with that financial advisor or that fund, your investment happens to be the one that is the outlier, because it's incredibly difficult to do. If you've got to have the selection that you're actually outperforming the market on a consistent basis by an appreciable amount more than all these commissions you're paying. And when you look at the market in that sense, and when you think about the way the business is structured and set up in terms of these people helping you manage your money and helping you, reach a retirement goal, and when you factor in the fact that it's really hard to beat the market, and you got to be paying these commissions, so you got to beat the market by more than just a little bit, it makes you question whether or not there are people out there who need financial advisors because they don't know anything about the investment, and they need to rely on people, and there's other advice that goes into it. But that's certainly a consideration. And it's not something the brokerage industry would want people to know, because it would question whether or not you need them. And again, I think that's on a case-by-case basis, and there's certainly people I've talked to who are trading their own accounts at E-Trade or whatever, and they get blown out because they don't know what they're doing. And so there's no question a place for financial advisors. But, again, it all goes sort of back to the commissions. You got to ask those questions, because if your objective is sort of just to track the market, and I don't want to have highs or lows, I just want to sort of plug along, maybe an ETF works for you, and maybe you don't need to be paying somebody, 1% or 2% or anything like that. The eighth thing that the brokerage industry doesn't want you to know is that all the information you would need on a financial advisor in terms of their, their background, how they did on their licensing exams, how many times they've been sued, have they ever declared bankruptcy, have they ever been charged criminally, do they have any liens against them, judgments against them? All that information is publicly available on the FINRA website. There you go. I know the brokerage industry doesn't want you to know that. It's out there. We're constantly doing intakes with clients where they tell us the name of their financial advisor, and I rattle off their life history, and they're wondering, like I'm some sort of Svengali, how do you know this? And the answer is, I looked at the broker report. That can be accessed at finra.org. It's in the upper right-hand corner, and it has all the information you would need. And, again, going back to those financial advisors who have been sued 45 times, if their investors, if their potential clients knew about that broker report and looked them up, I promise you they wouldn't give their money to these people. So, that's one where I'm confident the brokerage industry doesn't want you to know. FINRA is finally advertising its existence and getting word out. But, the brokerage industry, I'm sure, is not supporting that or funding it. That's the regulator who's stepping in to do that. So those are the top 8 things that I think brokerage industries don't want you to know. And we're going to go to some commercials and be back in a couple minutes.
Dr. Roger Meyer is pleased to welcome Dr. Robert Reinauer to the staff of New Vision Eye Center's retina practice. Dr. Reinauer is fellowship trained. His focus is the surgical and medical care of the retina, including detachments, macular degeneration, and diabetic eye care. Call for an appointment with Dr. Reinauer today and make the move to the fellowship-trained doctors of New Vision Retina Center. 772-257-8700 or visit newvisioneyecenter.com. New Vision Eye Center offers bladeless laser cataract surgery. Doctors Paul Minotti and Stephen Tate want you to be fully informed about all of the options available to you when it's time for your cataract surgery. We offer a gentle bladeless computer-guided procedure. This technology delivers unsurpassed accuracy and precision. Visit cataractsurgeryverobeach.com or call 257-8700. When it's time for cataract surgery, make the move to the Cataract Institute at New Vision Eye Center in Vero Beach.
To you, spare time is a foreign concept. That's why it's so great that Plains Dental Arts in Vero Beach is open on Saturday. Now you can see the dentist without missing work. Now that's a reason to smile. And here's more. Right now, an x-ray and cleaning is only $79. Get a complimentary Invisalign consultation and receive $1,000 off Invisalign. Plains Dental Arts is open Monday through Friday and yes, even Saturday. Call Dr. Alex Plains for an appointment today, 231-6004.
Part of the iTex trading community, your iTex dollars are welcome.
Welcome back, everyone. You've been listening to Wall Street versus Main Street. Before the break, we talked about the top 8 things the brokerage industry doesn't want you to know. If you've got questions or other things that interest you in terms of the brokerage industry and how it's set up and the ways in which you could be better educated on dealing with your financial advisor, check us out at wallstreetvmainstreet.com. We've got a number of resources there set up to provide some of that information. And if you've got questions beyond that, you don't see it there, send us a message, and maybe we'll get to that in a future program. You can also find us on Twitter, iTunes, YouTube. All of our episodes are live streamed, and they can be found on the website or in those places. And that's it. Have a great week.
You've been listening to Wall Street versus Main Street. The views expressed by the participants of the program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, the White Law Group, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, nor any of its subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal